Canada on the world stage this Monday night. Leaders gather in Kananaskis, Alberta. What's on the agenda?
Western powers converge in Alberta to talk conflict and commerce.
Something historic is unfolding in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. The tranquil wilderness of Kananaskis, Alberta, usually a haven for hikers and quiet retreats, has become the unexpected front line of a global economic battle. What began as a policy disagreement has erupted into something far more volatile. A standoff, a statement, a steel storm. President Donald Trump's decision to slap a shocking 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum wasn't just an economic maneuver. It was a declaration of war on the global trade order. And at the G7 summit, Canada fired back. Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister and former central banker, shed his technocratic skin and stepped into the global spotlight as a hardened negotiator. This was no longer about diplomacy. This was about survival. Factories from coast to coast in Canada, from Montreal's industrial zones to Vancouver's ports, ground to a halt. Streets filled with a rare kind of protest, silent, powerful, and unified. Automotive stocks in New York plunged, as if caught in the blast radius of Trump's tariff bomb.
China, first row. China, 67%. That's tariffs.
The G7 table, once a place of smiles and champagne toasts, has fractured into icy glares and economic ultimatums. We're not just witnessing a diplomatic crisis. We may be watching the collapse of the North American trade architecture as we know it. The mountain road leading to the Lakeview Chalet, usually reserved for elite ski tourists, was now lined with armed convoys and protesters. The sound of slogans competed with the thumping of helicopters overhead. Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived not with economic forecasts, but with fire in his eyes.
The Government of Canada will also review its remission.
Gone were the charts. In their place, steel-hard resolve. Trump had sent a brutal message to Ottawa: accept my terms or pay the price. Carney didn't flinch. His reply? My country is not for sale. This wasn't a skirmish over numbers. It was a full-on supply chain chokehold. Trump's tariffs squeezed industrial arteries, from the mining hubs of Yellowknife to the hydro-powered smelters in Quebec. In Ontario, auto plants dimmed, waiting for parts that never came. And while Trump cheered steel workers in Pennsylvania, Detroit's plants sat idle, and trucks jammed at a paralyzed logistics center in Mississauga. Let's pause for a moment. Could this have been part of a larger strategy by Trump, pushing Canada to the brink, only to force a new trade alignment entirely on his terms? Or was it just reckless brinkmanship? Even before the summit opened, Canadian streets were swelling with protests. In Ottawa, Sussex Drive became an impromptu town square. From high school grads to accountants, citizens held signs like "Allies don't bow to bullies." They weren't anti-American, they were anti-Trump. The silence of the crowd spoke louder than 1,000 chants. And it was chilling. Protests swept east and west, Halifax, Vancouver, Windsor. A leaked embassy memo revealed Washington's growing concern. The anger wasn't aimed at Beijing or Paris. It was aimed straight at America. When the cameras rolled and Trump shook Carney's hand at the summit, he looked straight into the lens and declared, "I'm the tariff man." Carney, calm but firm, muttered under his breath, "Nothing will be signed until fair rules return." The diplomatic playbook had just been shredded. French President Macron, speaking days earlier in Greenland, delivered a chilling rebuke to Trump's isolationism. The Arctic is not for sale. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, called protectionism a hidden tax on the family budget, and left the phrase in her Alberta speech, despite warnings it might provoke Trump. It did. Inside the private meeting rooms, tensions boiled over. Carney closed his notebook as if to say, enough. Then came the bombshell. Trump attacked Canada's auto exports. A 50% tax is just a teaser, he warned. More is coming. Carney fired back coldly. If you block the lane, the whole highway shuts down. A subtle threat? or a hint that Canada might collapse key supply routes unless tariffs are removed. Markets responded immediately. Investment banks issued dire warnings. North American automotive production could shrink by 10% within 6 months. A Quebec smelter manager told local radio, 500 workers are watching Washington and Ottawa decide whether they'll eat next week. In Chicago, a white goods manufacturer shut down for 2 weeks. The pain hit fast and deep. On the second night of the summit, the U.S. delegation left dinner early. Leaks from Edmonton Air Base revealed that Air Force One's departure time had been quietly moved up. Was the White House preparing to walk away altogether? The next morning, Trump was terse with the press. "We'll get a deal, but we won't wait forever." Reporters asked if tariffs would rise again. No answer. Inside, Carney was crafting a statement that, while diplomatic on the surface, read like a warning shot. It promised WTO challenges, export incentives for Canadian industries, and a 60-day ultimatum: lift the tariffs or face reciprocal measures and strategic decoupling. Outside, protest banners flapped in the wind. Yes to trade. No to threats. A sea of orange Canadian flags glowed in the alpine twilight. The summit's joint communiqué never came. No signatures. No unity. Just a cold fracture. At the final dinner, Macron, von der Leyen, and Carney stood side by side before the cameras. Macron declared, "Protectionism is not protection. It's a panic move." Von der Leyen added, half jokingly but fully pointed, "If your supply chain dies with the push of a button, you were never competitive." Carney stared into the lens. Canada extends a hand of friendship, but it will not applaud those who twist arms. Back in Washington, reporters demanded answers. Would tariffs rise again? The White House press secretary said only, "The president is flexible. Our interests are not negotiable." Translation: buckle up. Wall Street got the message. Automotive and construction stocks nosedived Monday morning. The Toronto Stock Exchange slashed its mining profit forecasts. The Canadian dollar lost value in hours. But here's what most missed. Even as the protests swelled, a new plan was already in motion. Canada had begun quiet calls to the EU and Japan, laying groundwork for a new critical minerals alliance. Lithium, graphite, nickel, all essential to the battery revolution, could soon be managed without U.S. involvement. Was this the beginning of a new economic bloc? Or, as one Trump aide called it, a hostile energy cartel? Either way, it signaled something bigger, a shift toward strategic autonomy that could realign global power structures. And then something symbolic but explosive happened. A Canadian military transport plane, tasked with carrying the U.S. delegation's luggage back home, refused the request. It broke decades of protocol. The message? If you target our infrastructure, carry your own burden. Pentagon sources played it cool. But leaks revealed that NORAD's alert level had ticked upward. Quietly, deliberately. The next flashpoint is already visible. A joint LNG project in New Brunswick, critical to supplying Europe with gas. Washington wants the deal. Ottawa wants leverage. But unless the steel tariffs are lifted, Canadian Parliament will likely block the financing. It's a deadlock that could freeze billions, and it all hangs on one sentence from a press conference, one offhand remark, one clash of egos. As summer rains washed across Canada's cities, protests quieted but didn't disappear. Banners reading negotiation is a right, not a threat, still hung from balconies. In between flower pots and laundry lines, they stood as symbols of a country standing its ground. Before departing for a month-long diplomatic offensive, Carney told reporters, "This crisis will end. The only question is, who pays the price?" Back in Pennsylvania, Trump stood before cheering steel workers and said, "I will not let anyone play games with us." But make no mistake, this is a game of brinkmanship, economics, and raw political power. And it's entering its most dangerous stage. So what happens next? Will Canada double down on forming a new alliance that excludes the U.S.? Could the European Union finally break from its cautious posture and stand with Ottawa more openly? Could the U.S. find itself on the outside of a new industrial order, just as the green transition accelerates? And what if the real aim of Trump's tariffs wasn't just about steel or autos, but about re-engineering alliances themselves? Think about it. Shake the foundation, and everyone scrambles to pick a side. The noise that started on a quiet mountain road now echoes in Atlantic shipyards and global markets. The steel heart of North America is pumping erratically, trapped in a crisis of leadership, ego, and inertia. Two neighboring nations, once seamless economic partners, now find themselves on opposite sides of an invisible wall. Until the world knows whose tariff will last and whose resistance will endure, this standoff will remain more than a diplomatic story. It will be a case study in the fragility of our interlinked world. What do you think? Are we headed for a new trade Cold War? Is Canada right to push back, or is Trump simply forcing fairer terms for American workers? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us as we follow the aftershocks of what some are calling the most disruptive G7 summit in modern history. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.